So yeah, basically to do with my work at the moment, I've been running I did an in-person event at Chelsea College of Arts that basically involved bringing some herbs and getting people talking, and more of a pilot scheme of how people interact, if they're willing to like take that into their short experience of hospitality, if it actually improves their connection at all, or if it's too short and a bit too much. So that was kind of what I was aiming with that. So brought a selection of different herbs and did the inclusion of nature in self-scale with the little Venn diagrams, and asked them, where do you feel you are at start here? And then some of them got food, added some of the herbs to their food, and some took parts home, and all these kind of things, and then re-asked the questions and had a form for further questions on a little bookmark when they get home, basically. And from that, it was all really positive, really, but the main feedback was that it should be a bit longer, because a lot of people just grabbed a coffee and then had a chat and went, or that kind of thing. So trying to like extend the interaction but keep the like physical aspect, but making it slightly more engaging, because some people, it was obviously in that setting, it wasn't exactly groundbreaking. Like it was quite a easily accepted principle for people to go on. So the direction I'm trying to progress into more now, because I've got the opportunity to do another event at Chelsea and potentially something with the Marylebone Hotel. So really what I wanted to speak to you was about introducing technology in this kind of approachable, engaging sense, rather than like a lot of people kind of think, oh, well, if you're introducing technology, that's kind of against what you want, isn't it? Like that's not the aim, but trying to bring this like symbiosis for it together to achieve that, really. So I've been speaking with a couple of people over, I'm not sure if you know Christina Libby, and a few people. So she does more work in the tech industry, and her like side passion project is to do with like biophilia and that kind of side of things. So I've been speaking with her a bit, and I did a panel a week ago, kind of as a consolidation of the work I've done so far and like what people thought of it, and to move on, really. And through that, been discussing a lot of like responsive immersive projections and that kind of thing, and trying to create maybe a form of art installation, but how it reacts, and having that kind of focusing upon the personal, like everybody's experience of nature is unique, and making that happen, but using technology in a way that doesn't mean people have to close for a refurb for it to be put in, or making it too like all encompassing and full on that quite frankly people won't let me do. And so you've got to make it approachable in that sense. So yeah, I've been looking into ways to use like the Xbox Connect, like Microsoft software, to use like tracking cameras for a projection, and making some kind of installation event playing with that. And also thinking about playing on how, you know, now everybody has to order with a QR code for menus when you go out, and it's kind of not gone away, it's still there in a lot of places. So in that instance, they're already on their phone, because I think sometimes when I've been speaking to people, the barrier is to get people to go on their phone, or like to pick up technology when you're out for a meal or you've gone out for a drink. It's kind of jarring against each other. But if they're already on their phone, bringing it into that kind of menu experience through, say, like an AR filter or something that comes up over the menu. And specifically to do with like the Marylebone Hotel, they do a lot of keeping it local and lots of like actions to be sustainable in their food offering that you wouldn't really know about, apart from like one line on their menu of like, this comes from here, and you don't always notice it. So trying to bring that to life in the work they're already doing, but say it comes over their phone, and then they can press different things and it grow up, and it's quite a simple way because they're already doing it. So really, I just wanted to talk to you about how, thinking on like that kind of train, what you think of it. Do you think it would be approachable? Do you think people would get engaged with it, or do you have any other things that you think would be better, especially down the side of like personal technology devices, like trying to get some way to use them in a setting, or like playing off the technology that a space already has? I think that's something I'm kind of interested in, but maybe not too sure how to get going on that kind of avenue. But yeah, I just wondered what your thoughts were really to do with that.
Sounds absolutely fascinating. So if you don't mind me asking, what are you? Are you an interior designer or a tech designer, or?
Well, my background's in geography.
Okay.
That's where it came from. So I did geography for my undergrad, and then did a lot of like urban planning, green building, that kind of side of things. Found biophilia, and then now in my master's, kind of reworked it into being something that I would be more passionate about, because maybe the property side of stuff, so in my family, is normally done. My mum was a surveyor, so it was kind of like, it was a bit, I knew about it and I wanted to try and do something a bit different, and finding this avenue of, I found a lot when I was trying to research it more, going into a hospitality industry and spaces that in that environment, it's still very much a, oh, we've added some plants, we're done. And I'm like, no. So that's kind of where it came from. And then it's just spin onward from there, really. So more of like, I suppose at the moment, the role is more consulting between the two to like communicate what one is and how it can benefit them. Because I've tried to do like panels and things, and I'm looking to do maybe a podcast or something on Clubhouse to kind of unpack a lot of what biophilia is and how people can approach it. Because especially talking to the hospitality industry, you're very lucky if you find someone that knows what you're on about, but before you have to like bring it down. So I think, trying to unpack it so it's not as overfacing as, oh, this is a load of academic stuff and I'm not into it. So that's kind of,
well, that's fascinating. I mean, I'm always interested in people who've got basically a hybrid career, as isn't it? You know, you're consultant, but then what in is quite difficult to actually explain. And I mean, you're working in an area where people have got natural barriers between understanding, you know, what you're doing, for example, as you say, in biophilia and hospitality, such different areas. And I found this when I started working on, before Technobiophilia had a name, but I was very interested. I've always been quite techie and quite obsessed with cyberspace. That's my thing. But when I started to bring nature into the mix and I started to read environmental psychology, it must have been a bit like you when you discovered biophilia. You realize it's a whole new world with a whole new breadth of research that you know nothing about. But furthermore, I think in my case, I felt very strongly that there was a huge prejudice between the two groups, because, you know, you've got the geeks on the one side who typically stay at home in a basement eating pizza and never get any fresh air, kind of thing, and then you've got the environmentalists or the nature people who have that prejudice against the geeks, and they've got very different values. But actually, once you start talking to them and bringing them together, they will often find meeting places, but at first they're just a million miles apart. So I totally understand what you're doing in trying to bring these kind of consciousnesses together, because they are very different. And also hospitality people, I mean, I find from years of working with technology and doing workshops on technology and trying to introduce it into new areas, I've always found there are certain types or groups almost of industries which they're not the people who will sit down with a computer for very long, you know, active people. And I would guess that hospitality falls into that category.
A lot of the time
doing active jobs, you know,
they're all busy everywhere,
busy all the time, and they communicate. They're very used to face-to-face communication. And if you kind of try and persuade them to do otherwise, or although I suppose actually when I started it was much more difficult, but now we've got things like Zoom, it's easier to get people used to face-to-face communication, but it's quite alien to a lot of people, and they don't want to do it.
Definitely.
As you found by the sound of it. all of those things to overcome. But then I suppose in your choice with working with hospitality, you hopefully will be able to show a financial or operational benefit.
In bringing the customer in, especially from a lot of the testimonials have been very beneficial in that of at the moment just letting people let me in the door to say, let's just try it out, see what's working here. Because like, for instance, when we were at Chelsea, I think it was like over 85% of people said that they would actively visit a hospitality venue if they were offering a natural event or experience, even as a pop-up.
Wow, 85%.
And I had like 43 people over the 2 days. So it's quite a decent sample size of people just passing through there was all types of ages and people all the way through. So like when I was talking to Marylebone Hotel, that was definitely okay, people actually are interested. I think definitely around London at the moment, like a pop-up or anything like that, as people are a lot more open to it, and then they'll try it and see if parts of it where you can take it from that and put it into a more long-term principle, which is definitely more of the model I'm working on at the moment, trying different things, different spaces and getting it going.
Yeah, and obviously lockdown has really fed into that, hasn't it? The whole nature thing is really starting to boom. So
getting one into the outside.
I'm trying to remember when I read the stuff that you put in LinkedIn in the messaging, I was trying to remember, and you might actually know this. I remember seeing a famous chef opening a restaurant some years ago, and the restaurant was designed so that it was small, everybody ate the same foods, and they had some kind of a virtual wall that changed with each course. Does this ring a bell?
I know there's a space that does type of like, like a VR headset thing that changes, but I've not heard about a wall changing.
Right.
There's a type of supper club that do the VR kind of goggle things that change with each course, and it's like you're in a different like dimension, as they call it, for each course. I think that's a bit maybe too restrictive for you can't exactly have a chat with your friend.
No, I was just going to say it's an isolating. No, this was the thing I specifically remember was when they had the fish course, the whole wall changed to an ocean.
Cool.
And it was, and it was moving. It was obviously, I think it was just a simple video, but it was very kind of overpowering, really, very colourful. And then when you had the meat course, I don't know, perhaps it was a forest or a field, I can't remember, but the whole thing was designed so that obviously everybody had to eat the same thing, because it all worked together. If I ever remember who that was, I'll let you know.
Definitely. Because at Chelsea I was thinking to try something similar with the projection and because they've done like before for their canteen space, they've done lots of like themed food days or that kind of thing. So and like on their back wall, you kind of sit. It's not enclosed area, but it kind of feels like it because you've got playing walls either side. So I thought, well, you projected there and made it kind of this is the event, or you can sit elsewhere if you didn't want to, and use. So say they did Italian, and you can put the Tuscan fields, and you can use diffusers and sounds and test out the stimulation of different senses and kind of experiment on what order things should be done or simultaneously, and seeing how people react, because I think it's those kind of like senses and small things that make the experience feel a bit more real and more natural than sometimes parts more with the hospitality in their design. Or I've seen a lot of things recently to do with like ceiling design mimicking like natural and organic patterns and that kind of thing, but their personal customer experience of that is not as linked with nature as like a physical personal interaction. So I think that's what I've tried to play on, thinking down those lines. So the canteen for Chelsea is supposed to open at the end of September because it's been shut for a long time, and then that space we're hopefully going to test some kind of projection and sound, and hopefully diffuser sense. There's a few health and safety things to go through with different diffusers being used in that space, and then we can work out, as I said, kind of a model of what people are responding to or not. And one of the things as well is to do with how to measure that connection, because at first obviously I did the self-report and that kind of thing, but I'm trying to look for more empirical ways. So things down, like, I'm not sure if you've seen, there's an experiment in a hospital, the name will come back to me, but there's a hospital doing like de-stress rooms, and they're measuring people's blood pressure changes and pulse and that kind of thing as a like empirical measure that there is an impact from it. So tried to work out if I could implement something smaller, but the main restriction with the Chelsea site is it's very much a passing through scenario rather than we have these people willing to say yes. So trying to work out if they're going to allow it to be we'll test here and here, otherwise looking to other sites, trying to find, playing on the pop-up, like a more unusual space or something, say a cafe that's shut and at night you can use it for a couple of hours, or these kind of things, to do a smaller experiment like that where you could get that kind of data.
And I'm interested, just before I talk about the data, I'm interested to hear how the diffusers work out, because I wonder, it could really put you off your food if you get the wrong smell.
That's what I'm interested. I'm also thought about testing the difference between the artificial and the real smell. So say from like the herb point of view, obviously the smell is a great attraction. So trying to work out to what extent people will be willing to accept the artificial smell. So obviously in some scenarios it's not allowed. So how you could kind of gauge it on what scenarios it would be okay to be accepted in. So I think that's something to try and play on. I'm hoping to run it over numerous days and kind of mix it as it goes and do different, almost like different trials from this point to this point and see how it changes.
A few years ago, I had a very posh afternoon tea on a cruise ship.
Nice.
And and I've never seen this before, but maybe you have. But you know, they kind of did the table with the pie, the kind of big cake stands and sandwich stands. But the first thing that they did was come round with a little squirty.
Oh, like a little perfume thing.
And they squirted the air above us as we sat, like a perfume spray just was around us. And it was like I think it was a violety smell. So it was kind of flowery, but foody as well. That was really interesting. But it was before we started eating. And so it just kind of came down on us for a minute or two, and then it was gone. But it was interesting. And the theatre of spraying it above our heads is nice as well.
Because I think that's part of it as well. It's like in a lot of experiences at the moment, you've seen a lot of visual projection and sounds and that kind of thing. So the smell and the scent in that way is less done. So but I think it's very interesting what you said about before the food, and like definitely trying to get it in the space before anything else, because you don't want it to put off, it's more to complement. So I think maybe some ways to try and test that before, and then you can do some like pilot studies of the different stages of the smell and then introduce it into that bigger setting at Chelsea. That might be
and if you have little gold squirty bottles, that they're kind of easily removed, aren't they? As opposed to diffusers can sometimes be, particularly if you're sitting close to one. Are you thinking of the sticks, or are you thinking of the electric diffusers?
I was thinking of the electric ones, because then you could time when you've got it on and off rather than slightly harder to control.
I think so. I used to have one of those, and I gave it away because it annoyed me. But then that was the smell, I suppose. But interesting. But going back to the other thing about testing made me think of something I've got somewhere. I haven't looked at it for years, but I was involved in this was an Irish company about 5 years ago, and I can't even remember what it was called, but I've still got it somewhere, so I can send you more information. What they did was they had a phone game, which was, I think it was like a nature game. It was using natural Irish landscapes.
Yeah.
And then they had this little device that was, I don't know, about 3 fingers, a little tiny device, and you put your finger on the device, and what you had to be able to do was relax, and it was linked to the video game. So if you relaxed enough, say it would start with a snowy scene, and if you slowed your heartbeat enough, eventually the snow would melt.
That's so good. Yeah, and
it
you
was
can really
very clever.
That's really cool. Yeah, and if you
and it was a beautiful bit of design as well.
Yeah.
I bet they're out of business now, but I'll have a look round for it and
yeah, if you could find the name, that'd be so interesting to speak to them. It's a really, the visual way of like noting that down, that's really interesting to play on that, because it's on a similar kind of visual feedback for how you feel. But there was something when I was looking at doing the responsive projection kind of side of things, there was a lot of, because there's more contemporary artists doing it that do color on mood and that kind of thing, and how tracking people's movements and how they move projects the color because it's based on their like body language. So doing that based on how they are perceived to feel because of how they're moving, showing different colors and moving, obviously as that, so say their hands are going like this, then the colors move around, but the actual color being shown is based off different information they've inputted to do with how they would say somebody moving in that pattern would be feeling, which I thought was really interesting to think if you could measure someone's feel without knowing anything prior to that. I was thinking, how can you quite measure it? But it was an interesting concept. I thought it was like similar in a way for your like reaction off your mood, but that like straight off if you're relaxing on the, that's just very cool. I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah, so it's going specifically off your pulse, and you are playing the game, so you're concentrating on the game, whereas in say a restaurant situation, it could be that you don't like the person next to you, and that's affecting your reading, or that you do like them or whatever, and that's affecting the reading, so you can't always be sure. But yeah, so how much of this is about the ideas and how much of it is about getting people to do it? Well, because that's a big part by the sound of it.
I'm on the getting people to do it is where I'm wanting to be. So that's kind of at the moment. I've got some dates in at Chelsea for the 22nd of September to do something in their cafe space, and potentially the week after if they're open. If not, we'll be in October to do the kind of visual projection side of things in their canteen space. So their dates in, and for the cafe I kind of have a bit more free reign of what I want to do because they like the herb thing, and I've had a few more calls with them since then. So basically if I have something good to pitch to them that's done, it's fine to try it. So that's kind of the deadline of where I'm at the moment. So
yeah, so
I'm trying this week has been basically talking to as many people as possible to gather it all together and go, right, which one we're going to go for, and hopefully see what happens with it. Because I think definitely with the technology and this kind of side of it is more where I'm interested in going, but at the same time it's kind of only the Chelsea that has been willing to accept trying it, and even then they wanted me to do the herb thing first, because I found a lot of resistance between the whole, but if you want to bring nature in, we're on board with that, but we don't really want you to just put a load of tech in there and watch people use their phones. So I was like, okay, but it's a different kind of thing.
Have you thought about using oxymeters, I don't know how you pronounce it, but you know when you're in hospital and they put a clip on your finger that measures the oxygen, and they were talking about it a lot at the beginning of COVID. and people were getting very low oxygen readings, and that was an indication that they were more ill than you realized.
Yeah.
Have you come across that at
No,
all?
not really, but that's a very I think that's almost easier, because if they like finger clip or something like that, I think it needs to be quicker than what.
Yeah. Well, on my previous phone, and I had a Samsung phone, and I've got a different one, but it doesn't do this. But on my previous phone, which was a Samsung S8, it was an S8, it had a stress meter. I don't know if you've seen these on phones. Now, my current phone doesn't have that, which is really annoying, because it was quite interesting to use. And basically, it just had a little window at the back, and you put your finger on it.
Yeah.
And what it did, it was actually an oximeter. It measured the level of oxygen in your skin.
Nice.
And it has to be very high. I think it has to be over 95% or something like that. And if it's lower, that's generally because you're stressed. So it called it a stress test, but it was actually an oximeter.
Yeah.
And it was and that is the same thing as what they clip on your finger in hospital.
Yeah.
So
that's
it would then say to you, you're very stressed or you're very calm.
Yeah. And then you could, I think, in the terms of the other variables as well, you could do something like that as somebody arrives at a venue or an experience or something, and then also do other kind of ask them to answer a question or something, so you've got a bit of a gauge on how they feel at that point personally as well, and then you can measure the before and after, because I think it's hard, like you said, there's other things at play in that setting, so you've got to be aware of it. But I think that as an idea is really like quick, a lot simpler, because a lot with the blood pressure and the pulse and that kind of thing, you're like, you've got to have some willing people that already know it's going to happen at the start. You can't really just have people coming in and off the street going, right, blood pressure time. Like, no, where am I? No.
I mean, what you'd have to do is talk to a medical person, a medical supply company about it, because I don't know. And I know that when they put this oximeter on you in hospital, you keep it on for a while. They don't just measure it and take it away. You sit there with it on. So I mean, maybe it's something that you could do at a table when people sit down. They just have this clip on. But how the numbers are recorded, I do not know. That's the bit I don't know.
Yeah, and get somebody to go around, because you see, I think definitely with this kind of, and a lot to do with the medical side of thing, the way that I envisage it more is in like the smaller setting of maybe in the cafe of Chelsea would be somewhere to kick it off, or somewhere like a less obvious space like the cafe that isn't used, or that kind of venue, because then you do have that bit more control over like gathering the data from the machine who's going to take the numbers. If you get somebody external to come and do that, along with, say, when you order a drink and get someone to do a pop-up, you can do both at the same time. So say if someone's ordering, you'd be like, oh, I'll take this off you now you've been sat there for 5 minutes, or integrate it into their experience slightly more. Because I think that's kind of one of the barriers at the moment, is now implementing these things in a way that you still get the data to put it into somebody else as like the roll-on effect, rather than it just be video evidence or like observations of what happened, because it doesn't always sing the same story, does it? Sometimes like it's nice to be like, oh, look what happened, but you need the fact.
I mean, there's when I first moved, I live in Bournemouth. When I first moved here, I discovered that at Dorset County Hospital, excuse me, they had an art thing going. They do a lot of art projects at that hospital. And this one was about, in the leukemia ward, they have patients who really have to be kept away from everything. They're in isolation. And what they did was give each of them a big screen opposite their bed, and they had a live feed one of the sea and one of the countryside, and they could choose which one they wanted, and they could have it on as much as they wanted, so it could be on all the time, of nature. And so, you know, if they had a bad night or whatever, they could look at the moon or whatever. It was a really nice idea. And being leukemia patients, they were hooked up to lots of things. Their measurements were always being taken, but they did not collect the data to go along with the video. If they had have done, it would have been brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. Because I would imagine you'd see big changes through that, especially if they were having it on for a long period of time. You could have got a lot out of that.
Yeah, I mean, if they were showing, if they were like showing stress from being in pain, and then you could see the stress going down, that would be so useful. But again, it's the two different worlds. The artists didn't think of it, and the medical people didn't.
So. Yeah, because they'll have gone, oh well, they're doing it. No, that's your bit. It's like,
have you heard about the Snowworld experiment?
The Snowworld.
Snowworld. I'm going way off restaurants now, but really interesting story. And if you Google it, I'm pretty sure it's called Snowworld, and it would, I don't even know if it's still going, but I think it was kind of around Seattle and northwest, Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
So this is a hospital, military hospital, where they were looking after soldiers who'd been burned in the Iraq War or whenever it was. So they were looking after these patients who had terrible, severe burns. And the worst thing about it was that you have to keep having your dressing changed every day. And every day they would have to remove these terrible dressings, and the soldiers would be in agony because it felt like being burned all over again, but there was no other way to do it. And what they did was they devised a virtual reality game called Snowworld. And the patients put on the VR headsets and so on, and they were in a game which was basically just, you know, racing around a snowy world. And so they were in a cold environment, and then while they were in this VR cold environment, they would change their dressings, and they didn't notice it.
Yeah, because it's that kind of like all-encompassing world of everything.
Yes.
So and playing with the nature like that. Yeah, that is such a good demonstration of the collaboration between the two, 100%. Because you can bring it so key together in that way. Because it's like, definitely, I mean, I'm sure you've found this at all, but a lot of people kind of that I've spoken to, I've either been very biophilic and they're very like, I think everything should be really natural and you should always just have a wooden chair with nothing on it, and how dare you think I'm going on my phone because I don't even want a phone. And I'm like, okay, but you know, that's just not the real world. Like you've got to find some kind of bridge between it. But like, that is the kind of story that you go, this is the kind of power that it can have, and then win people over slightly more over it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although some of them you never will. I mean, you know, I gave that up a long time ago. I found it was much more rewarding to work with the people who bought into it,
who were interested
than overcome the resistance of people who didn't.
Yes, I think slowly I'm learning the lesson. Yeah,
but I think
a fair few of interesting combos.
Sorry,
I definitely had my fair few of interesting conversations.
I bet.
Ones where you just want to back out a bit, like, oh, I'm sorry.
it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But just to go back to the Snowworld thing, I think it was fascinating because they were completely working on the basis that pain is absolutely in the brain.
Yeah.
And that if you can divert the brain or make it detour somewhere else, you know, then the soldiers didn't feel the dressings being changed.
That's so cool.
So, you know, that's an extreme example, but how could that work in your requirements?
I feel like in that kind, it's like you say, they're diverting it. I think like part of it is reframing how people approach nature. I think that's a lot of, especially through the side where I'm thinking the more of the like discussion and the panels and that kind of thing, a lot of people already think they know what you're trying to say. So and everybody in their head has their own thought or image when you say interacting with nature. Some people go to like, I'm by the beach, or some people are maybe watching Planet Earth. Like there's all different things where people think they've had their interaction with nature, but it's kind of reframing that in the hospitality, in that setting of that fixed space, because a lot of people think that it like can't, especially from, I think sometimes in the wildlife side of things, or people who view nature to do with animals less than plants, where things are at the moment, think that it's like, oh well, that's never going to work, you can't just put wildlife in there or like something to do with animals, because it's already got a load of plastic plants in most bars, so what you're worried about? I'm like, yeah, but there's the different, everyone's different perspective on it, and it's kind of that change of mindset of if you can tell everybody that their innate connection to nature could instinctively benefit them in a space that they're already going to go to anyway. It's like, just get that benefit out of it, and then later in their life they can bring that in and go, oh well, I did connect with it then. And looking even bigger picture, people are way more likely to act in the interest of nature and be more sustainable if they feel like they've got a connection to it and in their life in general. Because especially like being in London, like people, no one has a garden, no one has any like strong personal interaction with the outdoors in that sense. So if you're bringing it to the spaces where everybody already is, then you've got a big pool of people ready to listen that just need that nudge to go, look, it is in your life. If you do these little things, you know, that makes that better, the bit that you like. And then they, oh, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the quickest ways is through water. To get to them. And certainly, as I said, I live in Bournemouth. I can see the sea from my window, so I'm very lucky. And last year, Bournemouth was actually in the news because we were completely deluged. The minute lockdown was, you know, opened up, people were running to the sea. They were desperate. And it must have been the same in London with the Thames and any body of water, whether it's the sea or a river or a lake. I mean, it was fascinating, actually. People, they just rushed to be at the seaside.
Yeah, definitely.
Desperate. They were desperate. And there is an area of research called Blue Mind. I don't know if you've come across that. There's a book called Blue Mind by Wallace Nichols, which is all about how we're attracted, or why we're attracted to the sea, basically. It's well, water, but mostly the sea. And I mean, I just wonder whether that might not be a quick win to do something about that, preferably the sea, but also, you know, more generally water things, because people just long for it.
Definitely. And I think with water as well, it's not something anybody like a fair few maybe, but in terms of like in-home daily interaction, most people don't have, even if you've got a garden, you don't necessarily have water or that kind of like body of water interaction. There's the only thing that I've ever seen in a hospitality place where I've been trying to find stuff like this to do with water is there's a restaurant in London that has like almost like a classic fish bowl, but in like a matrix of them along through the restaurant where all the water's going, like collects and moves, but it's got a big space and it goes all the way through, like it's their artwork, like as in someone's got a poster up, these have got this going all the way through. And that's the only thing I've ever seen where someone's actively tried to use water in an interesting way, apart from people who are by the sea, or maybe they've got a river and it's where beachside restaurant or riverside cafe, whatever.
Yes, that's where you see it a lot. I mean, around here, there's loads of cafes that have fishing nets hanging up and all that kind of business. But I would have thought if you had that in the centre of London, that would also be a draw to people. But you wouldn't normally get it. Well, I mean, if you had a waterfall, either real or virtual, that could be interesting. You could have, you know, a screen of a waterfall. That could be interesting.
Even, like the live feed idea as well, because then you've got that movement of it, or like even like a video, or just something that is not always repetitive. You get that different interaction for people coming and going to it.
I mean, there's the fish tank issue, but I would be wary of that, because one place I used to live, there was a really great Indian restaurant, but it had a lot of fish tanks. It actually had booths, and then it had a fish tank kind of in between each booth.
A lot of fish food.
Yeah, except there was also a lot of fish shit. And you'd be sitting there eating with somebody, and then they'd look over your shoulder and they'd say, you know, I can see a fish trailing a great long poo.
That's not what's going with my
So that has always cautioned me against having fish tanks in restaurants. But again, here's some other interesting research, that they did try this in a dentist. They put a fish tank in the waiting room, and then they would take it out again, and then they would kind of measure the patient's vital signs while they were in the waiting room, either way, whether there was a fish tank or not. And the results always amused me, because they said that if patients had been waiting in the waiting room where there was a fish tank, they needed less pain relief, and they were more compliant in the dentist chair.
What are people doing otherwise in the dentist chair? I'm not complying, get off me.
You know, get off me.
Yeah.
Okay. So they can be good, but I think in a restaurant, I wouldn't, after my experience, I wouldn't risk it.
Not officially.
Just water, just plain, clear water.
Having that coming through, I think as well, like I'm thinking like in the spaces to implement something, like you said, just even if it's just one wall, a water projection, to get it going for like, I think most of it as well spirals around like conversation of something unusual in that kind of way. So then you've got it in the space and people can walk up to it. Oh, what's this about? And you can have like the messages embedded in it, and even smaller ways to do around it. It's kind of like with the herb thing that I did. A lot of people were like, well, what's the point of this? I'm like, well, a lot of it's to think about how you're currently feeling, having this being in your day, and like all the odd interactions that people don't expect that kind of create that unpredictableness of something like that in a space. So no, I think that could be really interesting, like to do a waterfall, like body of water movement in this setting like that.
And just plain, no fancy lights.
Yeah.
Just, you know, because people always want to put lights on water, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, I would just have it plain, you know, moving so it's a bit foamy or whatever, but not try and make it fancy, because it's the naturalness that is part of what it's about.
It's got to be kept in its organic way. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think also interesting, you could play off with the kind of wildlife around it, or even just like plants, and have it slightly less like, so say for instance at the moment, I don't know if you've seen them, but there's always, everywhere that I see that has plants at the moment, it's maybe just this week, but I've literally been going everywhere, they all have exactly the same plants. Like I think they're all just like, in the spaces near me, they must have all just gone to the same shop to buy these plants, but they're just all, you know, the classic big leaf, like green shape, but the plastic plant version. I don't know the exact.
I think it's called a monstera. I think it's called a monstera.
It's like a monstera. Yeah. And
monstera.
Everywhere, it's having the same plants, but even from a different point of view, if you try and recreate some of the plants that's going to be around the waterfall, you get that jewel of the technology with the real plants, and to create that atmosphere around it with it. And even you could even play off information and facts around the water and stuff like that. Like I saw somebody did something, there was like a short video that someone showed me the other day about if everybody, it was literally like 2 minutes long, this little video, but if everybody in the world planted a tree, what would the impact be of that, or is it even enough? And then it's like, no, but it's just short, like thought-provoking things that you could like intertwine into it. So it's to make it in a way that it isn't I'm preaching that you need to be more sustainable in your life in this kind of way, because people are, you go in for lunch, you don't want somebody to be shoving that down your throat, do you really? So you want to bring it in there almost subconsciously to them in a, oh, this is where you're thinking about it.
Yes, because there's two different things, aren't there? One is the, you know, information about sustainability and environment, and this is what you need to do and all that. But the other side of it that you seem to be talking about is the pure sensory gut reaction.
Yeah, definitely.
Connecting you to nature. Because if you can get that right, then the next step will be, you know, the nudging and the thinking about, oh, so here's this beautiful waterfall, and now I've watched Seaspiracy or something. Have you seen Seaspiracy?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be reminded of that when you're eating.
No.
But if you start to connect that, your own experience of water, of swimming or whatever it is, swimming's not a big thing, but that wouldn't work in a restaurant. But
come equipped with swimwear, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's the thing. It seems to me you're going for that.
Yeah, definitely.
I was going to say artistic experience, but it's not really. It's just a body connecting, a body and mind, very deep connection, which can be done really simply, can't it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely playing off a lot to do with being another, because so originally I lived in Sheffield where it's all green.
Right, I went to college in Sheffield years ago, yeah.
And then now I'm in London, and you're like, you get concrete anxiety, like, oh, it's too much. So just sometimes want to go home for the holiday, but like, oh, I'm just back. And it's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, it's a bit too much sometimes. So I think trying to just play on that feeling of how can you feel like you feel in the middle of the Peak District when you're in London, and create different, even like it's just a short response, but like I'm saying, just even the small things lift people's day or experience to the point where, oh, I might go back there, I might see if there's another thing like that, and it gets people thinking and talking about what it is and why that connection, what benefits it has, and how they can find it in other ways, and all that kind of like thought really about it. So yeah, that's definitely the angle.
You mentioned, I think you've been looking at technobiophilia. Have you seen my little book, Nature and Wellbeing in the Digital Age?
Is that the book about that talks about at one point the smartwatches about tracking? No, I think that was something that I read on your blog. I think that was something I read there about tracking people's vitals through different smartphone apps and like watches and things. But I think that was separate.
Yes, I think that was something else. No, because my book Technobiophilia, Nature and Cyberspace is quite a big chunky book, and it's quite expensive. Yeah. But then I did this other book called Nature and Wellbeing in the Digital Age, and I published that myself because it would, to find a publisher for that was just like too much like hard work. So I did it myself. So that's in paperback and Kindle. But it's got 50 ways to get closer to nature through the digital. Yeah. And so there's lots of practical things in there that you might find interesting to, might prompt some ideas. Yeah. Because I kind of talk about things like having a bamboo mouse, so you've got wood in your hand, or having a stone on your desk, really simple stuff like that. Yeah. But things that give you that momentary connection to the natural world in one way or another. So you might find that useful.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely check that out.
And the other thing I was going to say was to show you this.
Yes, I've written it down to talk to you about this when you message us. Like, show me what's this.
So it's got volume. That's the loudest. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
So it's actually quite annoying. It goes on for 2 minutes. I'll just turn it down now. My daughter's bought me that for my birthday in the summer, and it really reminded me of I said to them, and they thought I was a bit crazy, but it reminds me of a toilet in the services near Cambridge. And I used to go to this place quite a lot. And you go into this toilet, it's really small,
Yeah.
and the wallpaper is huge flowers. I think it's sunflowers all
wow.
around inside the loo. And they have one of these. So the minute that you walk in, you hear bird song. This was a few years ago now,
Yeah.
and it was weird, really weird. So you'd be surrounded by all these flowers,
Yeah.
and you'd be sitting on the loo surrounded by bird song.
Like you're being swarmed.
Yeah, it was crazy. So then they gave me this, and generally they suggest the makers that you put it in the loo. So I've got it in the bathroom here. So every time anybody walks into the bathroom, the bird song begins, and it runs for 2 minutes and then it stops.
And it all goes.
I still don't know what I think of it. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it there.
Yeah, your review's coming imminently, but you're not quite sure.
But I thought you'd be interested, because I think quite a few places use these these days.
And bring them into different spaces. But it's interesting like that, because it's also like the sound, but it's keeping the traditional shape of like the bird box, and that's like the play on it literally being the same, but kind of almost, I don't know what's in my head, but it's like the city version of like, if you've got a bird box, this is how you can bring it in somewhere else.
Yes.
If you're not gonna have any birds. Because I know like my parents are obsessed with their birds, like a bit abnormally obsessed with the birds at our house. So it's kind of like I'm like, we bring something like that into somewhere else. But it's even from its like a lesser extent, or maybe less overwhelming is what I mean, than being like one confined toilet, putting it in a larger space, or that kind of sound that's just that, it's like that small connections, isn't it, and build them all up together.
Yes, it's like those small reminders of nature that connect you to the outside world.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So yes, I think it's great what you're doing.
Thank
it's
you.
hard work.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think my main advice would be, don't let the doubters get you down, because there will always be that.
Yeah, just have to power over the hill. It's fine. You get used to it.
Just don't. If people say, if they just don't want it, fair enough.
Yeah.
Because there are many people who do.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of like anything, but it took me ages. I definitely spent way too long trying to contact different people and going meetings with different people for venues and being like, can I try something here? Like, this is what I'm looking at, this is what I'm doing. And they're all like, have you done it before? No, we're not going to risk it. Like, we've only just reopened from COVID. I can't afford any like risks here. It's like, fair enough. But did that for way too long a period of time without like having anything to keep the ball rolling in a way. Well, I mean, I probably spent maybe a month just going to meetings where people didn't maybe want it, or it wasn't ready yet. And then as soon as you get one foot in the door, one person who's willing to be like, yeah, next minute they're like, oh yeah, okay, I'll have a look. If you can do some more things or people come to them, we can talk. And I'm like, it's like they won't let you build a house till you've already built one. It's tricky.
So have you done research in, say, America or Singapore, which is quite an interesting place, Korea, South Korea, to see what other people are doing? Because I'm sure there'll be people who are ahead of you, and then you can say, look at this.
They've done it here. Yeah, because there's one lady, I think she's called Raji, from Singapore, who was actually in one of the early panels that I did in the discussion. She was telling me a lot about, she sells different biophilic products, but she's an architectural landscaper and does big projects. But she was telling me a lot about the different hotels and like the ways that they were trying to bring it in within Singapore. And it's like the Park Royale, the marina in Singapore. They've done lots of different, like more architectural based stuff in their hotel space. But that was kind of a lot of the basis towards people have tried to take that and do the full all-encompassing schemes. So I think a lot less on the lower, this can be implemented in any space perspective, there's a lot less. I found a couple in New York that are maybe doing the odd pop-up or other things. Like when I was talking to Christina the other day, she said that she went to a bar pop-up that was essentially in a wardrobe in this like tiny like closet where they'd done like a bar, and then they had different sounds and like lights and things going on. It was supposed to be natural experience, but it was so small, it was like I'm not feeling very natural being in there. So I think there's some different things playing around, but I'm yet to find that, like you said, that key example to be like, you see, it works, just try this. I've got a lot of different facts and stats of different like academic works and things of people doing similar types of things, but I think on this kind of scale I've not really found like the smoking gun to be like, look, it's gonna work, like let me do it. So
well, have you looked in California?
No, not really so much.
Oh, look in California. I mean, I used to spend a lot of time there before I couldn't. But they're very good on the open air stuff, and that's another side of it, obviously. And then you've got Silicon Valley, which, you know, go a bit crazy. I mean, the new Apple building that they've done, it's like a kind of huge donut, and inside, in the middle of it, there's an orchard. Not under glass. I mean, it's all open. You know, but it's just a massive orchard. So they're very tuned in on that. If I find anything, I'll send it to you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All kinds of, you know, that's a really good place for crazy ideas.
Yeah.
Also Portland, Oregon, I would look at as well. Portland, Oregon, and maybe Vancouver in Canada, all at that kind of coast. There's some crazy people. So you want to see what the crazy people are doing.
Definitely, you want crazy people. They've got loads of space wherever. Yeah, you can try it all out. I think that's definitely. I'm just very keen to get it going. So I don't know if you know other people that might be interested in getting involved in this kind of thing towards later September or something like that. Maybe at Chelsea for running that kind of virtual projection events, stuff like that. I mean, a lot of it I'm prepared to do, most of it on my own, but I think from a like maybe alternative venues or spaces point of view, if anything comes to mind, if you send me any links or anything, it'd be very much appreciated.
I can certainly do that. I mean, I do know various people who are involved in sound, nature sound. Is that
nice.
something?
Yeah. Well, definitely if I introduce something to do like a soundscape with the water projection or something like that, that would be great.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll send you some links. There's at the British Library, they've got a really big audio collection, nature audio. I've done a couple of events with them over this last year. And I've forgotten this woman's name. I was writing about her this afternoon, Cheryl Tipp. And she's like the audio curator at the British Library, and she has this huge, in fact, this could be a good partner for you. You know, the British Library have this huge collection of audio, mostly nature audio, but what they always need is partners to work with to actually make use of it, because otherwise it just sits there.
That would be great. Definitely be very interested in doing something.
She's very interesting, and also the BBC Sound Archive is the same thing. They've also got tons and tons of nature. So I do have some sound connections. Who is running your MA?
So it's at Central St Martin's. Yeah. So it's Richard Reynolds' course leader.
Okay, I was thinking it might be Carl Hayden Smith. Do you know him?
I don't know who that is. No.
Maybe he's not at St Martin's. I'll find out. Possibly not, but he might be interested.
Yeah.
I'll have a think, but I'll certainly send you the audio.
Yeah, that would be so helpful, because it's just small things that just give it a bit more depth of character than maybe I've got the capacity to do on my own at the moment, because I think there's just a lot of different spinning plates. So you just want to make sure everything's as in depth and like as best as it can be for that kind of opportunity for that venue. So you want it to be good.
Yeah. I'm just today actually writing a blog post about Radio Lento, and they do very specific things. They just go and tape real nature, and then they make it available as a podcast. They've got tons of them.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're based though, but they might be interested as well. But I do think actually probably the British Library is your best starting point, because that's what they're all about, is making that stuff available. And also they can sometimes get money to make it happen, which is good.
Yeah, always handy. Yeah. Definitely. Oh, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Well, if you think of anything else, just get in touch.
Thank you so much for your time, and this conversation has been very useful in the future. I'll definitely keep you updated as my plans go. I need to have a big consolidation this weekend, and then
good luck with that.
I know. Things where you actually don't want the weekend to come, because that's my plan this weekend. It's all going to come together.
Well, I think it sounds really exciting, and I'm sure that you'll be able to get something together. I mean, the other thing is, if you haven't already looked at it, the Biophilic Cities project, I'll send you that info. Are you familiar with them?
For the planted cities, is that the same thing that you mean? The
what? Sorry,
the planted cities event.
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, that's the one they're doing.
Cities is it comes out of the University of Virginia, and it's like a kind of international collection of cities.
I've seen it. Yes, but I haven't been in touch with them. But I am now know which one you mean. Yes.
Okay, they're good as well, and they've written about technobiophilia, so they actually understand it, which is good.
You like that, definitely. Yeah. No.
Okay. Well, let me know if you think of anything else, and I will send you what I've got.
Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
You too. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Bye.